Started. This is Steve Tuecke from University of Chicago Globus Group, and maybe I'll just do a quick sound check again, make sure everybody's hearing me okay out there in audio land. Everyone hear me okay? All right, good, thanks, Jim. All right, well, welcome to What's New with Globus. So what I thought I'd do today is, based on the people who pre-registered, it looks like we have mostly people who are existing users of Globus plus a few new prospects. So what I thought I'd do is sort of give a real quick intro, just catch a few people up. If you haven't seen this, there's longer versions of this tutorial with the intro material that are available out there. In fact, Laurel can copy and paste in the link to the chat. And then what I'm going to really do is do a demo, dive back into live demo of particularly focusing on the newer features of Globus that have come along, particularly in the last year or so. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. If you have questions, we have another machine here next to me that has chat on it. So if you have questions, go ahead and type in a chat, and Laurel can get my attention, and I'll answer it over the audio. And with that, let's get going. So just as a level set, right, what is Globus? Our sort of pithy punchline as to what Globus is today. So it is big data transfer and sharing. This is what I'm going to be showing some of the more advanced and newer features of that today. And many of you may have not seen the sharing, right? We started with the transfer service about, I don't know, it's now been 3.5 years, something like that, since we first introduced that service. And have seen tremendous growth in the use of that for moving my data around. But the number one feature request we kept getting was, okay, how do I share data with my colleagues and my big data with my colleagues? And so that's one of the big new features we'll be showing today that's now part of the service. Our goal is to do this with Dropbox-like simplicity. And what I mean by that is, as an end user, I should be able to do this myself. I shouldn't have, if I want to transfer shared data with other people, I shouldn't have to all get common accounts on the same Unix file systems and all that sort of stuff. It should be sort of automatic, very easy, point and click to any user that I want to give my data to. And doing this directly from your own storage systems, right? That's really a corollary of the first two, where if you're really talking big data transfer and sharing, the traditional Dropbox-like cloud synchronization models don't tend to work as well as you get up into tens or hundreds of gigs or terabytes of data, both for cost and performance reasons. And so everything we do is about how do you do all this from your own storage systems. As a real quick review, then these will be kind of the use cases you'll see me do in the demos today. There's two general use cases for Globus Online today. First one is, think of it as transferring amongst all of my accounts, right? I have logins at, of course, my laptop and desktop in front of me, my Exceed account onto some of the national facilities, my University of Chicago accounts, a whole ton of different accounts on different sites. And I need to move data around or synchronize. In synchronize, I talk about sort of Rsync style mirroring, right? I've got data sitting on one site that I want to keep mirrored onto a second site. Right, how do I do that amongst my accounts on all these different machines? And common use cases here are things like uploading and downloading data from HPC clusters, or downloading data from scientific instruments, or pulling data down to my desktop or laptop for visualization, things like that. And our mission is just make that easy, right? Take care of faults, do it asynchronously, so for big transfers I can fire it up, walk away, come back later, check on it, make it all work seamlessly with security. Second main use case, as I mentioned, is sharing, right? So now I say I want to share data with you, right? And we don't have accounts on the same underlying file systems for doing the transfers. So how do we share across user accounts, across institutions, and have that really simple end-to-end experience for that, again, for my big data? And so I'll be showing a bunch on that, drilling into that in more detail today. And of course, we do this all as software as a service, right? As a service we run for the community. I'll be showing off really primarily the web interface today. We have a command line interface as well, REST interfaces for deeper integration, help desk, all that. And actually, I'll show that as well, because that's also a fairly new help desk in the last year. And then we have this Globus Connect family of tools, which we've also updated recently as the way that you connect all these different storage systems into the Globus cloud so that Globus can do its thing against them for you. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the new features that have come along in that. So with that, let's just jump right into it. Let me get over to my browser here, right? So I'm at globus.org. As you've all seen before and probably have all done, right? We've got sign up, but let's go ahead and go straight into it. You know, as I'm sure many of you use, you can log in with your username and password here, right? But one of the features that we're seeing increasing usage of, and is really working nicely at this point, is alternate identity providers. And in particular, if you're say a faculty, staff, or student at a university in the United States, your university is probably part of a service called InCommon, which is basically, simply put, a consortium or federation of universities who have this service for making it easy to log into services like Globus using your campus ID, right? So what I can do is say, I want to log into Globus with my University of Chicago campus identifier. And so to do that, I say log in with InCommon. And if you're a first-time user of this, you'll see a page that will ask you what institution you're part of, and you can say remember it. That's why I didn't get that page. But now, having done that, I can log in to my University of Chicago account. It'll redirect me back to Globus. And the first time I do this, Globus doesn't recognize TKU Chicago, right? This is a new identity from Globus's perspective. So it says, what do you want to do, right? Do you want to create a new account here in this service? Or if you've already got an existing Globus account, you can type in your Globus username and password, again, just the first time, link these together. And from now on, what I've done is set something in my profile. I've added this linkage of my University of Chicago identity in my profile into Globus Online, right? So if I do it again, log out, say let's log back in, it'll redirect me to University of Chicago. This time there's even a cookie set already by the University of Chicago Shibboleth server, and it logs me right into my account. So from now on, I can log into Globus Online using my campus ID. Now, the second thing we've got really working well over the past year is, now having done that, being able to go back out to full end-to-end single sign-on with campus clusters. So for example, if I go back now to a University of Chicago machine, this is a University of Chicago Research Computing Center machine. This is the HPC cluster with the GPFS file system, normal HPC cluster at the University of Chicago. You notice it did not prompt me for my username and password. Because I logged into Globus using my University of Chicago ID, we're able to turn around and use that to go back to University of Chicago machines. So again, for those of you out in the university land, you know, if you've got a campus system that's tied into your campus ID service, we can now give you and your users this capability to just easy end-to-end single sign-on using your campus ID into Globus and back out to your systems, right? But if I go to another system, like let me go off to an Exceed system, you know, this is Trestles is a computer out at San Diego Supercomputing Center. I have to log in there, right, the first time I touch it. For those of you who've been using Globus for a while, you notice this page has changed a little bit. We've rewritten a bunch of our user interfaces to be a little bit smoother, more work coming down the pipe. But you notice it now gives me my credentials in here rather than being pop-ups. Let me go ahead and log into University of Chicago, or log into Exceed. Again, takes me out to the Exceed login page. And many of you have seen my demos in the last 6 or 12 months, have seen some of this. Right, so I can log in, and now I'm at University of Chicago. I'm on this Exceed Trestles machines. I can do transfers. Now, a few advanced features that have come along in the last year and a half in particular, is we've got some new options down below here. First one that you may not be aware of is file integrity checking. So this is a feature we turned on as a default maybe about a year ago to say, always do extra levels of verification of my data on my transfers. And this just comes from lots of experience with a lot of communities on moving big data around. It's from the school of hard knocks in moving big data, which is that data sometimes gets corrupted in the real world, right? It gets corrupted on the wire. It gets corrupted going through your kernels and your file systems, even out to the RAID controllers. And so in order to really provide the highest sort of verification, highest level of integrity end to end, we now, as a default feature, will reread all your disk or all your files after we do the transfer, do MD5 checksums, verify everything's working. All right, so that's now on by default. We have encryption's been there a while. You can even turn on now encryption if you have an endpoint that you always want data encrypted on. That's actually an option you can now do on the endpoint itself as well. If you turn that on, it overrides this flag. Otherwise, users can choose themselves. And then these other three options, which we've been building out over the past while, is sort of the Rsync style synchronization. Right? The first option here of only transfer new files, only transfer new or changed files. Right? Think I've got a bunch of data on my first site. I want to only move what's changed to a second site. Right? And so I can turn that on. I can use different options for how to check that, but we recommend the checksum. As you get down into using only modification times and file sizes, there's certain conditions where that's not necessarily entirely reliable for restarts and things like that. So if you really want, make sure everything's working cleanly end to end, we recommend using the checksum based. We can now say things like, if I delete a file on my source after I've done a thing, next time I synchronize, then also delete it off the destination, right? So I can not just add data and modify data, but remove data and mirror that with a second site. We can also now preserve file modification times as part of that transfer. There's one caveat on this, which is this requires a somewhat newer version of the Globus Connect server software and the GridFTP server. So some sites that have particularly older GridFTP packages, this may actually not work. But that anybody with a GridFTP in the last year or thereabouts, this will work for. So we can pick these various options, and then we can say things. Then we can do a transfer, right? So let me just pick a few things, and we'll take this 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like I've copied most of my data around here already. So let's remove a few things. We have these options in the drop down. You can now delete files from here as jobs. We can create folders from here. Again, some of these are relatively new in the last year. But now I can transfer stuff around. So if I go into that folder 3 I just created, pick a few files. Let's also pick a folder. And let's turn on, I've already transferred. So we'll, it doesn't matter. We'll just pick some options and go, right? So another new feature we just added to our transfer screen is now you no longer have to go off to a different page to actually see progress. We now have that all down here at the bottom of the screen. We can also now see our delete jobs. It's the same information that's available on the view activity page, but this way I can see just the new stuff that I've started since then. Which takes us now to some of the new functionality in our view activity. You'll notice some things, for example, like that by default, we actually give you a useful sort of label for your job. So you can see source and destination. Can also drill into that. So if you're on this page by clicking on the label or on the drop down, I can do that. I can even modify the label. So if I want to find this later by a different name, I can rename this label for the transfer. At least I'm supposed to be able to. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. So I can also drill into the event logs here. So some of this data or this approach has been around, or the information has been available in older versions, but we really improved the interfaces for managing some of this. Likewise, we've updated the interface for the managed endpoints, same style. This is sort of our new style of interface with this accordion view where I can drill into things, look at the different information available, all from within this managed endpoint panel, add and delete endpoints. All of that's doable here. If I want to add an endpoint, I can do that right here. Add personal endpoints, I can do that. So just some sort of updates and refreshes to the interface. So I just wanted to quick show those, but let's get back into some of the deeper features again. So let me move back over here to the Start Transfer page and talk about sharing in more detail. Actually, before I do that, let me also show the latest Globus Connect Personal, because I'm going to need that for some of my demo here as well. We've also updated the Globus Connect Personal, what we used to call just Globus Connect, right? We've now got this family of tools of Globus Connects. Personal version is what I run on my desktop and laptop, works through NATs and firewalls, offline, shut down my laptop, come back up, things work. And then we have Globus Connect Server, which is formerly known as Globus Connect Multi-User, same thing, but it's the server version for running on Linux servers with multiple users, tying to your identity systems, all that. So let me go ahead and install Globus Connect Personal on my laptop again here. So we'll call it my laptop, generate setup key, waiting for the network to come back. Seems to be on a little bit of a laggy network today. Let's try that again. All right, well, I got some little problem here, it looks like. Let me go ahead and download this. All right, well, so I may have to come back and do the laptop in a little bit here after the setup key's working. So let me switch over to sharing then for the time being. So what I want to do is I want to take a folder now from this endpoint, right? Go back to the use case, right? With transfer, I can move data around amongst my systems, or in places I can log into. But what if I want to share data from this University of Chicago file system, from this UCRCC, this I said is a GPFS file system at University of Chicago. What if I want to share that with another Globus user who does not have an account in that file system? Right? If this were a small file, a Word file or something like that, I'd use Dropbox, right? I'd shove it in my Dropbox folder, set a permission on that file in Dropbox to say, allow, give it to you so that you can access it. And then Dropbox will do its thing of synchronizing the data to the cloud and back out to you, and you can get access. And the key thing of that is that as a user, I can share with you even if you do not have an account on the same system. I don't require you to come get an account in some, in my local machine. We can all get our Dropbox account trivially, and having done that, it's very easy to share amongst that. And so that's the same experience we're trying to give for your big data now. And so the model is somewhat similar, where I'm out here at the University of Chicago's machine, and what I want to say is let's take this folder and share it out to other users. Now what I do first is I create essentially a virtual endpoint. We call it a shared endpoint. I'm not actually copying any data. There's no synchronizations or file transfers going on at this point. All I've done is created this mount point where if somebody goes to Tuecke share, what they're really going to is UCRCC midway ~Tuecke my project. Right? I've sort of given this way of getting to it. But by doing this, I've now kind of, if you will, exported this particular folder to Globus and said, Globus, you can now do fine-grained access control on this folder to any other Globus user, right? So just to show that it's an endpoint, right, I can go to it. There it is. That should look a lot like that, right? Because they're the same thing. It's the same bits on disks. Again, no copying of the data. But now having done that, I can set permissions for other Globus users, right? So I can say, logged in over in this other browser. Here I'm logged in as SJT, just another Globus user who doesn't have access to that University of Chicago machine directly. What I want to do is say, let's share this particular shared endpoint with SJT, right? And I do that simply by typing in SJT here, right? So now if we jump over to SJT, go to Tuecke #share, and there it is, right? So now SJT has access to that. SJT can now go use that. So you notice this SJT account has logged into Rsync, and I'll just refresh that. And now I can transfer data. So I can say, let's take this My Project folder and transfer that out to Rsync, right? So again, what did I just do there? I said, as a user on the University of Chicago machine, as Tuecke, create a shared endpoint, allow any other Globus Online user, in this case SJT, to have access to that data, and then SJT just went and transferred that data out. And it should be chugging along down here now, doing the transfer. But there's real access control going on here. So just to show that, remember I only gave read access to SJT. So if I try and create folder 5, right, this will fail, permission denied. So let's go back over here. give SJT access to that. Make sure I did that right. Yep. Now if I do that again, it'll create the folder, right? So now SJT even has write access into this folder. So let's go there, take a few files, transfer those into that new folder I created. Refresh, there it is. And if I come back to the source, go into folder, refresh here, we should see folder 5. There it is, right? Or even go back to the original host endpoint, and there it is, right? So again, just tried to make it really easy to make it so that I can share my data with you, provide places where you can upload your data to me, all without all the hassles of account management that often are associated with these HPC systems and other campus storage systems that we use. So that's the basis of sharing. Now, the next step of this is that as a user, right, I often do sharing. I often want to share not to just individuals, but to groups. And so this is another major new feature we've introduced over the last 6 months or so, is an entire system for allowing Globus users to create and manage their groups, right? The groups of your collaborators, however you want, however you define who you want in it, what your policies are on that, so that these can then be used for sharing and other purposes, which I'll talk about later. But so I've gone over here, to our new group page, and here we see, a group that I created, this Globus team group. Anybody can create a group simply by hitting the create new group and filling in the information. So this is a group I created, have various members of this group. You'll notice SJT is actually a member of this group. I'll use that later for this demo. But these groups have a lot of capabilities. The first thing is, as a user, I can control a variety of policies about this group. So I can say things like, who's this group visible to? I'm saying right now it's visible to all logged in users, but I can say only allow group members to see this group. So if I want sort of private hidden groups, I can do that. I can also control who the member names are visible to everybody, to only other members of the groups, or only to the managers, administrators of the group, right? I can say who can create subgroups, only the managers, administrators. And the definitions here are that an administrator is somebody who can modify the policies of the groups, right? I need to be an administrator to change what you're looking at here. A manager of the group can only modify the membership, can only control adding and removing users to the group. Then members, of course, are the members of the group. I can also control how users get in the group. Do I only allow you to invite people into the group, or can users request to join the group? And if they request to join, it can trigger whole workflows around that. And then how are groups approved? So then, if we go to other option settings, hang on just 1 second here. Sorry about that. Somebody just wandered into our room. So besides setting the policies on joining a group, I can also set some other requirements, like saying, when somebody tries to join a group, here's additional information I want from them, right? So I might want to know what department they're part of, or what institution or organization, and just make sure that I can use that in my checking of that membership, whether I want to let them in. The other thing I can do is say, whenever anybody joins this group, here's some extra terms and conditions that I want them to agree to, right? And we've run into this now a number of times where other projects, other web applications are starting to use Globus for their own systems. And I'll talk more about this later, but as an example, KBase is a US Department of Energy Systems Biology project that is building a web application for managing the data about their science domain, in this case, a lot of microbial genomics and system biology data. Well, they've got their own web applications with their own terms of service. And so this is a way that they can actually leverage our whole system, where they're using our users, but all those users join the K-base group, and in doing so, they're agreeing to the K-base's terms, right? So we're adding more and more capabilities like this where groups can now be used for other purposes besides just our own sharing stuff. And so, for example, I could put in my terms and conditions here, and now anybody who joins the Globus team group has to agree to that before they're actually admitted as a member. So that's kind of a quick overview of groups. I can create subgroups on this. So I can maintain proper relationships. So I've got my Globus team group with my development team and user services teams under that. We have invitations, so I can invite people by email. So if I want to invite, Steve Tuecke at gmail.com to this group, I can do that and send an invitation off to Steve. I can also search for people. So I can search for, I don't know, click on Rachna, woman in the group. Got a variety of accounts. I could say select and send invitation, right? So various ways I can invite people to join the group. And then I have workflows as the administrators and managers of that group, where I can see things that have been sent. I can cancel them. I can accept if people request to join. I can decide all that within this interface. Now, having done that, I, of course, can use that for various purposes, right? I can use that for sharing. So if I go back into the permissions, I can say, let's remove that permission for SJT, and instead, let's give rights to the Globus team group. So we'll search for that group. Select it. Yep, looks like the right one. There's the message, some of the group members, because people are allowed to see the members, or I'm allowed to see the members more accurately. And use selection, right? So now I've just shared this endpoint with the Globus team group. So now if we go over to here, refresh this, now SJT can get access to it via that Globus team, but again, it's read-only, so doing things like trying to create a folder will fail again, right? So sharing, right, again, so the key point is I've got data sitting on my file system. How do I share it with you, right? There'll be a few new features coming down the pipe here to keep an eye out for. You saw when in group membership, if I want to invite somebody to a group, I can just type their email address in and have the right things happen. They'll get the email, they follow the link, they join the group. We'll have a very similar thing coming very soon with shared endpoints as well. Right now, I need to know their Globus name, or I need to know the group I want to add to. We'll soon be adding the ability to, say, share to an email address, and then they'll get the email and they can follow the link, and that'll just work. We also are starting to get the bits of other parts of sort of sharing. So for example, I can say, show me the link for this endpoint. So if I take that link, I could drop this in an email, send it to the person I've shared to. So again, if I go over here, paste that link into SJT's browser, it'll take them to that page with that shared endpoint already brought up in their browser, right? Make it very easy for you to point a user at exactly what you've shared with them. I think those are the main new features we've got for sharing. Maybe I'll pause for a second here. Any questions? If you have any any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. Yeah. Okay. All right. Dan said the reason I might have been not able to create an endpoint is I may have run out of. There's a limit on the number of endpoints we allow users to create. So let me go over to the manage. Let's see if that's what it is. Let's go over to the manage identities, administered by me. Let's go ahead and get rid of. Yeah, that's probably the old one. Oh, it may be. Yeah, no. Well, let's get rid of that one. And this one I know I don't have anymore, so let's get rid of those. So, all right. So now let's go ahead and try this again. Do my laptop. That might have been it. All right, so let's go ahead and set up my personal endpoint. I already downloaded it earlier, so let's go ahead and install this. Drag and drop installer. Go ahead and replace that. Start it up. Paste it in. And we're up. So you now notice we got a new menu icon here. A few new features that we've got in our in the endpoint, or in Globus Connect Personal. So just to show that it's working, so there it is, that's my laptop. One feature we have now is pause and resume. So if I, for example, get onto a slow network at a Starbucks and I don't want to use up bandwidth, or I'm at home and doing other things, I can just pause my Globus Connect Personal. You can now see there's a little double bar pause icon in my app. And now any transfers I try and do there will just suspend, waiting for it to start up again. Right? So I can pause and unpause as I need to. It's still got automatic checks for updates, right? So automatic updater still there. Looks like I'm up to date on that. Good. Preferences. All right, got a couple questions here. First question is, a Globus account is required for sharing? Yes, a Globus account is required for sharing. I'll come back later to what some of the requirements on subscriptions on a Plus subscription versus not. But yes, in order to share, for me to share with you, you would need a Globus account. One of the things, as I mentioned, with that inviting, sort of sharing to somebody by email, what that'll do is give you an email that when you follow that link, if you don't have an account, you can sign up for it right then and proceed with using it. We do not yet have anything in terms of sharing to people who do not have an account, or sharing via HTTP to everybody, but that's sort of future stuff we're considering. Another question, can one restrict the ability to create shares to members of a specific group? Yes. So as a systems administrator, the owner of that endpoint, right? In the example I gave, if I come back over to here, right? I did sharing from UCRCC Midway, right? Again, this was an endpoint that's administered by the systems admin team at University of Chicago Research Computing Center. When they set up this endpoint, they actually had a variety of options available to them related to sharing. The first option is, do you want to allow sharing of your local users at all, right? If you don't turn that on, then only the traditional file transfer mode will work. If they turn on sharing, then they can control who they can share to. Currently, they can't control it via a group. They can control it via individual users. So you can set up the Globus Connect server to say only allow particular users to do sharing from this system, right? Local users. You can also control what paths you're able to share from. So as a sysadmin, I can say I only want to allow people to share from their /public directory, or only from their home directory, but not the dot files in their home directory, or only read-only sharing from my Scratch file system. Maybe I want to allow my big simulation users to share their simulation results out, but not let anybody modify my Scratch file system who doesn't have a local account. Right, so that's all controllable via essentially an allow deny list in what's allowed to share. So we kind of think of that as defining your sharing DMZ. Then having done that, the user can do sharing within the bounds that you've set to them, your local users. And then they can share out to any other Globus user, right? So the whole point is to empower the users, the end users, to then, once they're given the right to share from a particular storage system that they have an account on, then they have control who they share to. All right, any other questions? All right, so let's push on then. So, and feel free to keep typing in there, and Laura will interrupt me as appropriate to answer. So if I go back in to the Globus Connect Personal, a few new options that are available here. If you want to delete your Globus Connect Personal entirely, the configuration, everything, maybe create a new one, create a new name, or just you're cleaning up a machine, you can do that cleanly. More importantly, we now have the ability in Globus Connect Personal to do sharing, right? So not only can I do transfers, uploads, downloads from my machines, but we now have what we call personal transfers and personal sharing. That is the ability for me to do transfers, say, between my desktop and my laptop, or better yet, between my desktop and your laptop across users. And so let me show you how that works. By default, let me change it back to the default permissions here. Right? So this is what I would normally have. So my home directory, I can do transfers to and from, denying access. Right? So let me start with transfers amongst my own machines. So let me go to my laptop. Now I've got another machine out here that I'm also running Globus Connect Personal on, which is my desktop machine. It's my iMac. here at the office. So what I've just done is now logged into my laptop locally, my desktop remotely. And now I can do transfers between them. Everything else is the same here, right? So I can say, let's take, looks like I'll take this, just keep it quick and easy to start with. I'll take this file 1, and I'll transfer that across from my desktop to my laptop. Now, this is a new feature. It's only available to Plus users, which I'll come back to later. But what I've just done now here is made it so that even if these two machines are behind NATs, behind different NATs, so for example, my desktop is at work and I'm sitting on my home network, we can still do these sorts of transfers. And the key thing we've done is added a bunch of capabilities to Globus Connect Personal to do essentially peer-to-peer transfers, to do, using a lot of the sort of voice over IP sort of protocols for doing peer-to-peer stuff. That's now a native part of Globus Connect Personal. So even in this, it doesn't work in all situations, but the vast majority of networks, it should allow you to do these sort of peer-to-peer transfers. And actually should be, so there it's done. See the check. If I refresh, there's the file 1, right? So that's transferring stuff between my desktop and laptop. But as I said, I can also do sharing, right? So I can do things like say, let's go back in here to my preferences. And what I'm going to do is set things up. We have a question. Encryption still possible on the P2P connection? Yes, it is. The protocols under the covers, it's UDP based, but then we run what's called UDT, which is a reliable protocol over that, and then you can do encryption or not on top of that. And so basically, we do the magic down at the network level to get these things connected, but then everything else feature-wise is essentially identical across this approach. All right, so let's go ahead and try and do some sharing now from my personal laptop, right? So I've got my laptop here, and what I want to do is say, I've got a folder on my laptop. Let's share from, let's say I'm going to allow sharing it out of my temp folder. So let's go ahead and add temp and turn on shareable on my temp folder, right? So now what I should be able to do is go to my laptop, which I'm on, go to the temp folder, and let's take this bucket folder and create a shared endpoint out of that. So we'll add shared endpoint, we'll call it bucket share. So now I've created a new endpoint, bucket share, Tuecke bucket share, backed by my laptop tilde temp bucket. And again, well, actually, let's go ahead and go to it over here for the fun of it. Bucket share, there it is. And now let's just do the same thing. Let's say, let's share that out to SJT. Right? And now SJT can come in and everything else is the same. Right? So if I go to bucket share, I need to refresh this page to pick it up. There it is. Access to it. There's a file, and I don't know, let's go to Go EP1, which is the tutorial endpoints that you all have accounts on with just a very tiny quota. And actually, that's going to be too big for that quota. So let's take a different file and transfer that across. Right. So now I'm doing a transfer out of my laptop here. I shared it to SJT. SJT turned around and did a transfer of that out to an endpoint that they had access to. Right? There's some caveats on this, right? So for example, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are not doing synchronization to some third-party cloud service. So an implication of that is to do a transfer from my laptop has to be online, right? It has to be online, have Globus Connect running, not paused, right? But if I shut down my laptop, the transfer request will just basically sit and wait, right? They'll be pending until I start it back up and get access to it, right? So, but it does give me a way to transfer stuff around. As another example, just to show yet another user, Vass from our team created a shared endpoint on his laptop called Project X, again, that I can go out to and do transfers to it, right? So I can do a transfer from that, say, to my own shared endpoint on my laptop. So I don't know, let's take this ln-zip file and transfer that over. So again, just to recap some of what we've got that's new, right? We have sharing, right? So on any endpoint that's enabled it, right, that the sysadmin has turned on the right to do sharing, that I can log into, I can now create shared endpoints. I can set permissions on that shared endpoint to allow people to get access to files and folders on that endpoint. And then I can do sharing and peer-to-peer transfers, not just from servers, but from my desktops and laptops. And then maybe the last thing to show on sharing is I also have the ability to share only portions of endpoints. So I can say, let's only share out this server traps folder to SJT. Let's clear out that other one. Right? Now I should be able to actually do what I wanted to. Yeah. So I've got my server traps. Now I should be able to go over here as SJT, go back to that bucket share endpoint. And now SJT can only see that server traps folder and do things within the bounds of that. Right? So that's sharing. I'll pause there. Any questions on sharing before I move on to the last two little things? Like somebody's typing. Can you share with limited permissions to share forward? So I'm interpreting what you mean by that is I share to you, you share on to another user. No, you cannot do that today. What you'd instead do if you wanted to support that use case, and you sort of can, but not directly in the way I think you may be thinking. What I can instead do is say share to a group, make you a manager of the group, and then you can add people to that group to share within that. All right, so then the last thing, if you have any more questions, go ahead and type them. But in the meantime, let me go on and show sort of a last teaser of new capabilities coming soon. So we are now in alpha testing of the ability to also do endpoints that are backed by Amazon S3 buckets. So let me actually show you what that looks like. I've got an endpoint created called Tuecke hash S3 test. And surprise, surprise, it looks like an endpoint, right? We're trying to make everything work consistently. But just to show you what's going on, I'm logged in this here into the AWS Services Console so I can see this endpoint, right? So if I go up a level, right, here's all my buckets, my Tuecke test bucket, and in the Tuecke test bucket is these things. Well, I created, before this demo, just got to get to the right browser window, an endpoint called Tuecke hash S3 test, which is simply backed by this bucket, an interface to this bucket. So you see the same folder 1, 2, file 1, and 3. It's different sort order, but same information there. Now, having done that, everything else is the same, right? Now, to show this demo, what I actually have to do is switch over to the new beta version of Globus Connect Personal that will be released shortly with the support for this. That has the necessary S3 support to it. So now what I can do is say, let's go to Tuecke My Laptop and share, let's upload, let's grab, what should we do here? Let's grab, just to show some new files, we'll upload files 4 and 5 from my laptop up into that S3 bucket. Oops, I must have sync still turned on down here. Yep, so let me turn that off, because we do not yet support sync on our alpha in S3. Now we've submitted it. Shouldn't take long. There looks like 4 is showing up and 5 is showing up. If I jump back to S3, refresh here, there it is, right? So the point of this capability really is to say, one is if you want to have cloud storage that just works within this, that you can do that. But even more importantly is what we're seeing is a lot of customers who are starting to use Amazon for a lot of different things, for doing their processing, for writing other systems, their own applications, and wanting to use S3 or are using S3 for those systems they're building. So just like we've done with transfer and sharing against your own file systems on your own campuses, your own Linux file systems, we built that so that instead of replacing your system, we can layer cleanly on top of it, right? You can keep using your file systems as you want to use it, but all this transfer and all this sharing stuff, can be added onto it. We've done exactly the same thing with S3, right? So I can still use my S3 bucket natively. I can do things with it. But we now have this interface that allows you to do reliable large file upload and download from S3. I can even do sharing from it. So this S3 bucket I've also configured to allow SJT to get access to this, right? So I can go to that same S3 bucket. There it is. And if I go out to, I know there's another endpoint out here that has the necessary support for the S3. I can select it and say, let's take files 3 and 4 and do a transfer of that out, right? So again, full transfer, full sharing capabilities on S3 backed buckets. So that's just my little teaser of what's coming down the pipe. That should be in full production over the next few months. If you're interested in more learning about this, or even being an alpha or beta tester on this, send us a note at the support site. If you log into our support at globus.org and send us a note that you're interested. So with that, let me jump back to slides and wrap up here. So a couple other little things. I mentioned Globus Connect server. Besides the new name, it used to be called Globus Connect multi-user. The big new thing we've got in that, as of about 6 months ago or so, is native packages. So we've got for about 15, 16, 18 different flavors of Linux across the RHEL branches and Debian branches. We've got native RPM, so you can do just apt installs, yum installs of this, updates, all just work. It's got a nice setup thing that allows you to even change your configuration locally, reapply the setup, and it'll differentially update both your local Grid FTP servers as well as your endpoint configuration. So we've really got this now so that managing a server with Globus Connect, to connect it to Globus, is really as easy as managing a desktop with Globus Connect Personal. And it's all out there as part of the Globus Toolkit repos. Now, I mentioned a couple times earlier that some of the things we're starting to do are part of a subscription, part of something you buy. And what this is really fundamentally about is that, we are, University of Chicago, right? We're a nonprofit that's trying to provide high quality software to the research community, right? Specifically to universities and national labs and the like. One of the problems is sustainability, right? Long term, we want to be doing this and providing high quality software, but there's sort of a running joke in the software community, in the federally funded software community, which as soon as you get something working, they stop funding it. And there's unfortunately more than just a grain of truth to that. And so we're really trying to come up with a new model by which Globus can be a long-term viable, high-quality service for the research community. And to do that, we're introducing sort of a quasi-commercial model. Again, this is still us as a nonprofit trying to do this for you. So to do this, we've introduced really think of it as a freemium model, right? There continues to be free services. There continues to be all the stuff that we had done basically up to what we released this fall: file transfer and synchronization, creating your endpoints, public and private endpoints, creating server endpoints, creating personal endpoints that you can upload, download to your servers. All of that is and remains free for the nonprofit community. Also, being a recipient of sharing with the new shared endpoint support, being a recipient of sharing is free. Right? What you pay for, what you need a Plus subscription for, and Plus is essentially our end user facing premium functionality. What you need that for is to create and manage shared endpoints, to create and manage groups, and to do the peer-to-peer transfer or personal transfers and sharing that I showed you between Globus Connect Personals. Now, there's two ways that you can get a Plus subscription. You can buy it. We now have in the website support for purchasing via credit card here. So we have, if you go to the subscriptions page in your profile, subscribe now. Anybody can get a 30-day and 1-month free trial if you want. You can charge the credit card with different pricing for nonprofit versus commercial. So that's one option. But the other option is, I can find my window again, is that institutions can purchase what we call provider subscriptions, resource providers purchasing and giving them to various people. So we have these Plus packs where an institution can buy a set with volume discounts and give them out to whoever they want. And that's really what these are at the bottom of the subscription page, groups that you can request provider subscriptions for. It'll sponsor it for you. We also have other provider features, premium features. For example, we call a managed endpoint, right? A managed endpoint, first off, by buying a managed endpoint, you're buying support, right, for your storage system endpoint that's connected to Globus. But on top of that, you get some extra functionality. You get, first off, a management console. Right? If I go back over to the site here, you'll notice I have this extra link in my site, which you probably don't have in yours, called Flight Control, because I've been enabled with this as the administrator of a managed endpoint. And what Flight Control is an ops console, right? It gives me as an administrator of an endpoint the ability to see all the activity to and from this endpoint, drill into things. So I can say, show me all the transfers by SJT against this endpoint. If there's errors, they show up here. I can drill into individual transfers, see what's going on, right? So this is functionality all directed towards administrators of the service, not end users, and is part of our premium functionality. We also have branded sites. So quite a few sites now starting to, it's skins, right? Do your own skins on Globus. So for example, this is NCSA's Blue Waters supercomputer that heavily uses Globus Online. They have a skin, but what you're looking at here is Globus, right? It's hosted and managed by us. And so we have the option where, you know, campuses or research projects or, you know, any provider that wants to can purchase a skin from us that we'll set up and maintain for you. Alternate identity providers, right? You saw me log in with InCommon. That's supported, that's free for everybody. But if you've got your own identity domains that are not part of our set or not part of your campus credentials, we can add those so that you can provide complete end-to-end single sign-on support to users into Globus and back out. We have commercial nonprofit pricing, and then we're also well along in Internet 2 Net Plus pricing. Net Plus is a program with Internet 2 for making it much easier for campuses or any Internet 2 member to purchase cloud services and soon Globus with pre-negotiated pricing and contracts so that it makes the procurement process much easier. And then last comment, you know, we've also done a lot of work on the platform side of Globus. Everything I showed you here today is not only available to end users, it's also available to developers. So if you want to build your own web application that leverages users, identities, and federated identities, and groups, and transfer and sharing, you can do all that in the context of your own applications. You know, we've got one we're building called Globus Genomics, which is a genomics analysis system. I mentioned KBase earlier as a systems biology project, which is leveraging all of the user identity management, group management in the context of their gateway. University of Exeter is an interesting example where they built a data archive service on campus that you can upload data using Globus, associate metadata with it, and publish that into their DSpace service on their with their big data campus storage. So again, they've sort of integrated the bits in an interesting fashion for their own application. CI Connect is a high throughput computing as a service. Again, all deeply integrated into Globus, users, groups, transfers, all that. So if you're interested in that, we can go into that in more detail. Drop us a note offline. Happy to talk more about that. And so with that, I'll wrap it up. Go give it a try. Let us know if you know, we'd love to hear both good and bad through our support channels of how it goes. And don't hesitate to email us if you have any questions. So with that, I'll take any more questions you have on the chat. I'll stick around for a few more minutes, but that's the end of the formal section. And thank you very much. Any questions? So go ahead and just type one in the chat. All right, thank you. Thanks for coming. All right, just seeing a lot of thank yous, no questions, so good. All right, fantastic. Well, go give it a try, and happy Globusing.